The opening words to a song by the Moody Blues called Night in White Satin read like this. Nights in white satin, never reaching the end. Letters are written, never meaning to send. Beauty I've always missed with these eyes before. Just what the truth is I can't say anymore. I want to take off on those opening words in light of this matter of family and the Supreme Court's recent decision to enforce gay marriage nationwide. Paul the Apostle in Scripture, when writing to the churches that he had established, had said to one church that they were written epistles read of men. The word epistle means letter. Written letters read of men. We as the church were to be written letters read of men in this matter of family, and were to demonstrate what a family really was in light of what God had instituted it to be, not according to the world dictates, secular, and not according to the religious ideas that have changed the meaning of that word family. You could go on the streets and get the general opinion of people on the street as to their definition of the word family. I ask that you, the listener of this audio or video that I'll be putting out, ask yourself that question. If I were to ask you, give me your definition of family and its purpose, its meaning, and who instituted it. Was it by the will of men or by the will of God? If it's by the will of God, what do you mean by the will of God? When did it take place? Now, if you begin with the book of Genesis, you're given a true description of when it began and why it began, how it began, of Eve being taken from the side of Adam, not from his foot, not from his head, that she rule over him, or he rule over her. She was created from his side. Now, people reject that. They think it was just a myth, it wasn't real. Well, you throw that out, what do you got left? You got what the world has to offer you. I'd rather go with what God has to offer and then getting past just a religious take on this. You'll get all kind of religious opinions and ideas about Genesis and what happened there at the creation of Adam. And then introducing Eve into the picture. Adam being lonely, not having a helpmate, and God respecting that gives him what he wanted. Now understand, in Adam, there was both male and female. We can't comprehend that. We see a distortion of that today, an attempt to try to produce that. A guy feeling feminine, or a woman feeling masculine. And they get confused, and there's a distortion of what God had originally intended and what came about after the fall of Adam. Had Adam not fallen, this expression could have been done by Adam himself, being male and female. We can't understand that. That would take another whole video to explain what I mean by that, but I won't go there right now. But God didn't do it that way, because Adam feeling lonely, not understanding certain matters, God gives him a helpmate, a woman made from his side. And then it institutes marriage of one man to one woman for this sole expression of something much deeper beyond just the flesh. They became one flesh. Any reason before the fall of Adam, they were one in spirit. It's after the fall that this thing of the word flesh, that could have been a good thing. The flesh would be simply an expression of a spiritual reality in a temporal world. I've said this over and over again in many of my videos. You are a spirit that's eternal, that came from an eternal realm, came to this realm, into a physical body, in a carnal world, to express to this carnal body, to a living soul of emotions and intellect, and a free will to allow the human spirit to express itself through that soul's intellect, emotions, by surrendering of its free will, and acting out in this life the eternal purposes of God in a temporal world that would have been a world without end. But because Adam cut himself off from the spirit and chose to go independent from God and act and became a living soul, it says of Adam that he was a life-giving soul, where Jesus, the second Adam, came to give us that avenue back to being a spirit, a living spirit. He quickens us in our spirit and has this spirit wrestle with this soul that we have created independent from God, being conceived in sin, it says, or being cut off from God through our natural parents, and thus shaped in the iniquity of that parent. Iniquity meaning your race, your cultures, your creeds, and all the things that we know. Paul terms it the flesh, meaning beyond just the skin body, but also its views and perspective, carnal, developed good and bad, totally independent from God. Apart from God, it says of this flesh, there's nothing good. And people want to argue with you that they're good. All good gifts came from God. And that gift is this eternal spirit quickened by the Holy Spirit in you. If that's not in you, and it's not activated, and your soul's not surrendering to the activated human spirit, there's nothing good. Even though you may call it good, but to God's eye, it's pushing you further and further away from God's original intent. And now I want to introduce you to a song you hear it played in many a wedding, Christian weddings. It's called the Wedding Song. Listen to the words of that song. He's now to be among you. God's in this union of marriage. God's among you. At the calling of your hearts, your soul, your emotions, your fondness for one another, what we call love. It's called phileto, which produces children through eros, a sexual attraction, which is blessed. The bed is undefiled in the Lord. So understand that. He's now to be among you at the calling of your hearts. Rest assured, this troubadour is acting on his part. The union of your spirits here has caused him to remain. Now hear that. Very important part. You've got to be one in spirit. So I will ever to marry an individual, couple, male and female. That spirit has to be present in that union. Whom God hath joined together, that no man put asunder. You know, it has to be that God has called you. Beyond just your heart and your soulish fondness for one another, because that fondness can come and go. That's why you end up in divorce. If agape love, that's another word for using the Bible for love, doesn't come into play, a love that's unconditional, which can fulfill the vows that they expressed in many a wedding, which independent from God should never be expressed based in the flesh, because the flesh cannot keep these vows. What were the vows? In sickness or health, better or worse, rich or poor, until death do we depart. I mean, how many have broken those vows? We're sworn not to swear neither by heaven nor by earth. Swear not at all. If yes, be yes, you know, be no. We dare to make such vows. Now, apart from the leading of the Holy Spirit and the Spirit in that relationship, those vows will fail. They have to. Especially if you start your relationship off from the carnal flesh and opinion and ideas of yourself in this world. It has to end. So the union of your spirits have caused him to remain. He remains there. Solomon expressed in the book of Ecclesiastes that a three-strand cord is not easily broken. A single strand, a man by himself, lonely. Expressed what Adam expressed in the garden, he felt lonely. He finds himself a partner. And the two become one. And the third strand, some people say, well, it's a child. No, I don't see it as the child. Because many relationships have stayed together based on they stayed together for the sake of the children. It would have been better today separated. The third strand in this three-strand cord is the Lord remaining. Working that situation to a good. In sickness or health, better or worse. Him working all that to a good. Rich or poor, he could work it to a good. But if he's not in that relationship and you're basing everything on phileto, fondness, that fondness will wear thin. And when you bring a child into your life and you ain't prepared for that in your spirit, you're in for some trouble. It'll wear you thin. I mean, you can attest to everyone. Apart from the Holy Spirit and God's manifesting His unconditional love to me and to my wife, and her to me and me to her, my fondness for her and her fondness for me has come and gone. Come and gone. It comes and goes. So let's read on in the song here. The union of your spirits here hath caused Him to remain. For whenever two or more of you are gathered in His name, there is love. There is love. Now that love is agape love. God's unique, unconditional love. That suffers, does what it's due. It doesn't retaliate when wrong. Hopes all things, believes all things. It sustains you. It keeps you. Considering any other way. As Paul said to the church of Corinth, for it's this love, agape love of Christ, that keeps you from considering any other way. For I thus judge, come to this conclusion, that if He died for all, then all of us were dead in the human capacity and limitations of our mind, cut off from God. For the love of Christ constrains me, keeps me from considering any other way. For I thus judge, if one died for all, then you all were dead. And in that He died, that now we which now live to what He has accomplished and offered in our human spirit quicken. We don't frustrate that grace. And we don't live unto ourselves anymore. We live unto Him who died and rose for us. That's the answer. That's the third strand to this three-strand cord that cannot be broken. Now the song goes on. Now here you will notice where the conflicts come in. A man shall leave his mother, and a woman leave her home, and they shall travel on to where the two shall be as one. As it was in the beginning, is now, until the end. Woman draws her life from man and gives it back again. And there's love. There's love. We see the order of God established, and not the debates of this world, whether a man dominates or a woman dominates. God says point blank, the woman came from Adam. She was bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh and came from man. Woman. That was God's order. He would not lord over her, but would be a helpmate at his side. Nor would she attempt to lord over him. That's why she wasn't created from his head, but from his side. You can take it as a literal fact, you can take it as symbolic, but I'm just telling you, that's a fact. That's how it works. Apart from this, a man won't leave his mother. You may have There's a song about mother-in-law. Remember that song? Oh, God. I can play that song actually on my guitar. And the words of that song express this man not leaving his mother. A mother-in-law, mother-in-law. It says, the worst person I know. And it goes on, mother-in-law, mother-in-law. She scares me so. If she would leave us alone, we would have a happy home. And don't come back no more, mother-in-law, mother-in-law. And the next stanza of that song, I won't go into the complete song, but here's the next stanza. Mother-in-law, mother-in-law, Satan should be her name. To me, they're about the same. You know, every time I open my mouth, she steps in and tries to put me out. How could she stoop so low? You know, the interference of a mother, many times a father, so they're not willing to let their children go. You know, it has more interference with a marriage than you can imagine. It causes many a conflict. Going on with that song of the wedding song about the woman to leave her home. You know, the old expression is where the heart is, there's home. Your home now has changed, and it's with your husband. Under the leading guidance of the Holy Spirit, not his will over your will, it's your two wills together in agreement with the leading of the Father, of your spirits and your soul, emotions, and intellect, by an act of your free will, both surrendered to him. Avoids many a conflict when it comes to mother, father, brother, sister, family, home. And they shall travel on, but the two shall be as one. As it was in the beginning. Now, I got a lot of good study on that. In the beginning. In the beginning, before the foundations of this world, in the mind of God, was his decree, this institution of marriage of a one man for one woman, and to be an expression to the unity of that male and female, one flesh, one spirit, of God's original intent before the foundations of this world. Well, we've seen that in the book of Genesis, all disrupted when man gets cut off from God, acting independent from God, and begin to wax worse and worse till we see what we see today, the byproduct of a nature cut off from God, where what was one time wrong becomes right. What was one time right becomes wrong. Now, without the establishment of an absolute, we call God, and what he decreed in the beginning, before the beginning of this world, and how it would play out, and how it would play out if man would cut himself off from him and his will. We're seeing that happen today. You can go today with a democracy, which is the will of the people, a 51% majority agreeing or disagreeing, and from past experiences we know that this would never have passed, as Jerry Falwell and the religious sector of this world has said, would be the moral majority. We're not living in the moral majority anymore. It's not the will of the people anymore. You don't want to go with 51% of the majority voting on this matter, yet you don't want a strong elite making the decision, which we've seen happen with the will of an elected by a president, the Supreme Court and its members, thinking you're going to get a fair shake. I mean, they're not representatives of God. They're representative of the government. And they're no longer representative of the people and the will of the people. So you wouldn't want that either. You throw out God and it is absolute, and his reason and purpose behind why he has done what he's done. I've sat and written out of this matter of this establishing of a law to be enforced, that now every state in this nation has to allow this gay marriage and all the benefits that go along with that. It's not the will of all this nation, but it's determined by the will of a elected Supreme Court. Try to violate that. See what happens. Let me now continue this, coming out from an indirect direction, from a piece I was called "The Law of the Land is the Will of Man." It's a question. The law of the land is the will of man. Is it now? Let's see. Let me start reading from this article. I heard the other night off the web, a web that trapster is going to venture into it, think of the web, that God's laws are not the laws of this nation of ours. Hear that? They argue that point. But the will of 51% consensus of the people. Now some think about this for a moment. Are the laws of this land determined by a 51% consensus of the people expressed through our governmental bodies? Thinking further, if 51% of the people agree that it is all right for a man to take his neighbor's wife and property, would you agree with this because 51% of people desire it? Sounds silly, right? Well, something to think about. We're getting to that day and age now. The Supreme Court is not even 51% of the majority of the will of the people. It's a strong elite. So, reading on here, going even further, which is something we see more and more today, if by executive order, we're seeing this a lot today, a leader of this land were to put into law something as silly as allowing an individual to seize his neighbor's wife and property, would this be right? Now, I'm using a silly illustration. You could say the same thing with this recent ruling of the Supreme Court, if we had put this to the people. If you answer to either of these two cases, 51% vote or executive order, if your answer is no, that wouldn't be right, I ask you, why? No, I agree, but why would you say that? If we as a people or nation throw out the idea of God behind the laws of our land, where are we heading? We don't understand why God even gave law. That comes out. If we, as a people, do not know the reason and intent of why God would give a law in the first place, do you understand where we're heading? We don't even know. We don't want to know, so we just throw them out, throw God out and make up our own laws. Think again with me. If Adolf Hitler, by his executive orders, was right, where's your argument? If you have cut God and his purpose out for the giving of law. Do you even know why God instituted law by reading the book, the Bible? That our government and legal system placed the right hand upon and swear to uphold, which they're going to get rid of that. I want to address this with a simple question. Which came first, the law or the promise? The question the Apostle Paul asked. If you don't understand this question or its purpose, you might want to read on. There are promises that God made long before the giving of the Ten Commandments, or any other law one could pull up out of this book we call the Bible, or anywhere. As a matter of fact, we read that God revealed this promise to an individual called Abram 430 years before the Ten Commandments were even introduced. It's also written that even the Ten Commandments could not be annulled by God's promise. Now the question would be, what was this promise? Without a long explanation of the history of the Hebrew people and to whom this promise was revealed, know that this promise was that God had delivered humanity from what the law would reveal. Hear that? That God had delivered humanity from what the law would reveal. What did the law reveal? First, that humanity had gotten, back then and even today, had gotten away from this promise to deliver us from the condition we see around us. It can't be done. Look around you. Manifest to the breaking of these laws from God. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the problem today isn't a matter of how we institute laws or give credit to. Any law would prove what the Ten Commandments prove. What did it prove? It proves that God is totally out of the picture in humanity's decision making, proving a real need of deliverance from our condition. Because God, believe God out of our life. A condition that has dared to throw out our Creator, thinking we could run this dog and pony show without Him. Take a look around you. What do you see? What once was considered wrong now has become right. What was once considered evil is now called good. When it comes down to a 51% majority vote or the will of a strong elite, this is the results. Consider this fact. If an absolute is thrown out, one which would say this is wrong and this is right, the idea of right wrong is left to the whim and will of the majority or some form of dictatorship. So in conclusion, know this. We here in the United States of America are no longer one nation under God. That's becoming a well-known fact. But only the will of a 51% majority that's growing stronger and stronger, where the minority has become subjected to the laws that once were good, now becoming evil. You realize this soon, very soon. This immoral majority will soon be under a strong elite who also, in time, will be under the rule of a single individual. Okay, now you ready for this? People may not want to hear this. He's called the Antichrist. This Antichrist, the devil. Now people don't want to hear that. Well, I'm saying, you take it for what it's worth. This Antichrist, in the intent of the laws he is establishing, will be to the total destruction of all humanity. Now ponder this, people of this land and this world. Now I have one more final thought. I don't follow a God of law but one of promise. Me personally. What do I mean? If I were to say that I follow a God of law, the debate would be which God, Is it the God of the Jews and their laws, or the Christians and their laws, or Islam, or any other ancient God of the past and their religions? The God that I serve is the God of promise, who only used the law, I hear that, only used the law that he gave to bring us back to what it was that he promised. I end with that promise. A well-known verse, totally misunderstood. You see it at baseball games, football games, someone with a big sign, John 3:16. For God so loved the world. Now he did that before the world began. That he gave his only begotten Son. That whosoever would believe on him, and what he's promised, to save us, they would not perish. That's the God of promise. But then you got to see you got a problem to gain this promise. A promise that's unconditional love. No conditions. That his law does good work, proving your condition and need of deliverance. Now I have a few people respond to this. Mary, my friend, responded. Unfortunately for this station, this is the sad truth. I was watching an interview with CNN, and Judge, she was mentioning that judge was of the highest court from somewhere in the Bible Belt. Can't remember state. Anyway, this judge opposed same-sex marriage. He was stating that it was God's law written when this country was founded. The interviewer was arguing exactly what Paul was saying in this email. I emailed to her. It was disheartening to see how God was being thrown to the curb and how he discredited this judge factual information. The judge finally said he would take it to the Supreme Court. I was hoping the judge would ask him to take a coin from his pocket. In God we trust. That's what it says. How do I know? This will change. It's changing. I responded to her, Mary, this was the interview I saw on the web the other night when she was talking about. A judge argued with CNN commentator. All well and good, but both missed the point of the law, as the Lord has revealed to us. So did David Knight on InfoWars, where I saw this. He had this interview there, and this clip from this judge, where I saw this, seen as an issue of the laws of men versus certain inalienable rights brought out in the U.S. Constitution. Rights that are said to come from God. I don't believe any of them understood these God-given rights coming to us from the justification work of God the Father through the Son before the foundations of the world. That's the promise. God saw our problem. I've been told that as long as this nation throws out God's justice and justification, which corrected the fall of Adam and Eve and put us in the condition that we're in, they will never see justice. You see this today, all this cry for justice. Every race, culture, and creed wants its justice. This is being confirmed more and more every day. God is the only just and justifier. Apart from this, humanity has no rights at all and can't blame anyone without judging himself to missing the real problem. Thus man will wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived, holding down this truth with the lie that we can solve our problems and don't need God to do it. The idea of a secular humanism is raising to the top of this junk pile. Man, in the name of man, by the power of man, to the glory of man. God no longer means anything to the majority of the secular and religious world. You expect the religious world to be more in a ball, yet you see it demonstrated by this Christian judge, but by this Christian judge Manson. His idea of the perfect law falls short. He didn't express that. I have stressed over again the purpose of the law, the purpose of the law. It is fallen on deaf ears. They see it as a code of self-righteousness to gain God's favor, thus throw out his favor of unconditional love, mercy, and grace given to all before the foundations of the world. Now, I had another piece I couldn't find it. I want to read it into this. But this whole idea of what's happened with the Supreme Court, the article I had wanted to read, I found this one instead. Touched upon, though, we judge that which we don't understand out of fear of condoning it. You have people taking one side of either judging this matter or they feel they have to give in and condone it. You see a lot of churches doing it. I believe it was the Episcopal Church and the Presbyterian Church now condone it. And they're even thinking about changing their doctrinal statements and their eulogy as far as a marriage service, to change the wording in that and take out the biblical words. I mean, it's sad. I mean, I don't want to sit there. I don't want to judge that, but nor do I want to condemn it. I understand why it's come about. And for those that want to take the book of Romans and out of that book of Romans, where this matter of women with women and men with men, and use that against the gay person, you're missing the point. You're holding down a truth with a lie. That the potential to be this byproduct of a gay relationship, gay marriage, is a byproduct of something far worse. It's the nature that's in every one of us that we inherited through the fall of Adam and Eve. If we don't face that problem, see that, you'll see iniquity of this parent visits the third and fourth generation. And what we're seeing today is generations of those who are self-righteous and don't believe that they have a sin nature, have cut God out of their lives, and believe that they're good, that God's a liar, that they were born good, when it says over and over again, there's none that doeth good, not one. He came to save us from ourselves. He came to save us from the fall of Adam, this injustice done to us, where we have this nature, and see the byproducts of not only homosexual behavior, but murders, thefts. Everything you can imagine is the byproduct of something far worse, the sin nature of Adam. Christ took that sin nature into himself and solved that problem. I mean, there's a lot more I could say to this, and that's all I'm going to say for now. I may come up with another video on the same thing, but I mean, they're missing the whole point. You don't have to judge it, you don't have to condemn it, you got to understand something. The fall of Adam. How God, through the shed blood of his Son before the foundations of the world, justified us, saved us from that fall. And now, quicken us in the Spirit, and we can learn to live out of Spirit and not walk in the flesh in the direction that it's heading today. God bless you.